Captain, we have a serious problem with the aircraft. You must listen to me.
What?
The airport was loud, busy, careless. But Professor Daniel walked through it slowly, like a man who had learned that rushing never brings peace. Beside him walked Ayla. She kept her handbag close to her chest, not because it was heavy, but because she had learned to protect what little still felt hers. "Are you sure you're okay?" Daniel asked softly. Ayla nodded, forcing a smile. "I always am." Daniel knew that smile. It was the kind people wear when they don't want questions. They reached the aircraft door. The soft hum of the plane filled the air. Daniel paused. "You don't have to pretend with me," he said gently. Ayla looked up at him, surprised. "I know," she replied. "That's why I'm here." And with that, they stepped inside the plane together. Up in the cockpit, Captain Raydan adjusted his seat and glanced at the passenger monitor. Routine, professional, until his breath stopped. The man entering the aircraft, Professor Daniel, his teacher, his mentor, the man who once told him, "If you want the sky, you must give up attachment." Raydan stared, then the camera shifted slightly. And Raydan felt his chest collapse. The woman walking beside his teacher, Ayla, the love he never stopped carrying. The woman he lost because he chose waiting over choosing. No, the word never left his lips. The door closed, the flight was sealed. Ayla followed Daniel to their seats, window side. The clouds outside looked soft, endless, almost forgiving. Daniel placed her bag above carefully, then sat beside her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ayla laughed quietly. "This feels strange," she said. Daniel turned toward her. "Strange how?" "Like life suddenly remembered me," she replied. Daniel smiled, not playful, not proud, relieved. "I waited a long time for that feeling too," he said. Their shoulders touched slightly as the plane prepared for takeoff. Neither moved away. The engines roared. Ayla's fingers tightened on the armrest. Without thinking, Daniel opened his hand slowly, openly between them. No demand, no rush, just an offer. Ayla hesitated for half a second. Then she placed her hand in his. The plane lifted off the ground, and something inside both of them did too. In the cockpit, Raydan felt the aircraft rise smoothly. Perfect control, perfect altitude, but his eyes burned, because on the screen Ayla was holding Daniel's hand. Not gripping, resting, the way someone rests when they finally feel safe. Raydan swallowed hard. Years ago she had waited for him like that. He never came back. Ayla leaned closer to the window, watching the world shrink below. Daniel spoke softly. "You don't have to be afraid," he said. "Not with me." Ayla turned toward him. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were steady. "I'm not afraid of falling," she said. "I'm afraid of falling where I'm not wanted." Daniel looked at her, heart heavy and honest. "Then don't fall," he replied. "Stand with me." Silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It was full of things both were too careful to name, yet. The captain's voice filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking." Ayla froze. Her blood went cold. She knew that voice. Daniel felt the change instantly. "What is it?" he asked. Ayla whispered, barely breathing. "That voice is my past." Daniel looked toward the cockpit door, and for the first time he understood this love would not remain untouched. Perfect. Ob tardi bilkul thik rakte hue, Sidha Part 2 Shirukarta Hoon English Main Romance or Emotion Zyada Flow Continuous Voiceover Friendly. Ye part by Coffee Lamba Hoga Talk Total Mil Car 1 Gante C Zyada Narration Bane. Airplane Part 2, when two hearts begin to lean toward each other, the seatbelt sign turned off. The cabin relaxed into a soft hum, the kind that makes thoughts louder than sounds. Ayla slowly released the breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Daniel noticed. "You're still tense," he said quietly. Ayla smiled without looking at him. "I've learned not to relax too soon." Daniel didn't ask why, he simply nodded as if he understood exactly what she meant. Outside the window, clouds stretched endlessly white, soft, untouched. Ayla stared at them. "Do you ever feel," she asked after a pause, "like life gives you the same lesson again, just in a different place?" Daniel turned slightly toward her. "Yes," he replied. "And every time it asks whether we're brave enough to answer differently." She looked at him then. His face wasn't young, but it was honest. Lines from years of thinking, not pretending. That honesty made her chest ache. They sat in silence for a while, not the awkward kind, the kind that slowly becomes comfortable. Daniel finally spoke again. "I never planned to travel with you," he admitted. "And yet, I can't imagine this flight without you beside me." Ayla's fingers tightened slightly around the edge of her sleeve. "That scares me," she said. Daniel smiled faintly. "Good," he replied. "It means it matters." She let out a quiet laugh. "You don't sound like a man who's afraid of consequences." Daniel's gaze softened. "Oh, I am," he said. "I just decided not to let fear make decisions for me anymore." Those words stayed with her. Because fear had decided far too much of her life already. A flight attendant passed, offering drinks. Daniel ordered coffee. Ayla hesitated, then said, "Tea." Daniel smiled. "You always choose tea," he said casually. Ayla froze. She turned toward him. "How did you know?" Daniel paused, then realized what he had revealed. "I didn't mean," he began, but Ayla's expression wasn't suspicious, it was thoughtful. "You notice small things," she said. Daniel nodded slowly. "I had a long life where no one noticed me," he replied, "so I learned to notice others." That sentence landed gently and deeply. Minutes passed, then Ayla spoke again, her voice lower now. "The man in the cockpit," she said quietly, "he wasn't cruel." Daniel listened. "He was ambitious," she continued. "And I admired that, I really did." She swallowed. "But every time I needed him, there was always another flight." Daniel closed his eyes briefly. "Not because he was angry, because he understood." "I waited," Ayla said, "until waiting started to feel like disappearing." Daniel turned fully toward her now. "You didn't disappear," he said firmly. "You survived." Ayla shook her head. "I don't want to just survive anymore." Daniel reached out slowly, not to take her hand, just to rest his fingers near hers. "Then don't," he said. "Live." Their hands touched. This time neither pulled away. In the cockpit, Captain Raydan stared at the instruments. Everything was stable, everything was perfect. And yet his chest felt unbearably tight. He knew Ayla well enough to imagine the conversation she was having. She was opening up. She always did when she felt safe. That was the part that hurt most. He had loved her, but he had never made her feel safe enough to stay. Back in the cabin, the lights dimmed further. Passengers slept. The world narrowed to 2 seats and a shared silence. Ayla leaned back slightly, her shoulder brushing Daniel's. She didn't move away. Daniel felt the contact and froze for a moment, then slowly relaxed. He let his arm rest along the seat close enough that she could lean into it if she chose. She did, not suddenly, not dramatically, just enough to say she trusted him. Daniel's breath caught. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply stayed, because sometimes love doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it just arrives quietly and waits to be acknowledged. Ayla whispered, almost to herself, "Why does this feel like something I was missing without knowing it?" Daniel answered just as softly, Because some people enter our lives late but at the right time. She turned her face slightly toward him. What if it's wrong? She asked. Daniel met her eyes. Then let it be wrong for the right reasons, he replied, not fear. Not loneliness, choice. Her eyes shimmered. She nodded once. That was enough. The captain's voice echoed again briefly with a routine update. Ayla stiffened, but less than before. Daniel noticed. You're stronger than you think, he said. She smiled faintly. No, she replied. I'm just finally not alone. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment because that sentence felt dangerously close to love. When the past finally speaks, the cabin felt quieter now. Most passengers were asleep, wrapped in blankets, unaware that 3 lives were slowly colliding in the same sky. Ayla hadn't slept. Her eyes were open, but her mind was somewhere else. Daniel noticed the way her breathing changed whenever the cockpit door came into her view. You don't have to carry it alone, he said gently. Ayla turned to him. I don't know how to put it down, she replied. Daniel leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice. Then let me hold it with you. Something about the way he said it, calm, steady, without urgency, made her chest tighten. She nodded. A short while later, a flight attendant approached their row. Sir, she said politely to Daniel, the captain would like a word with you if you don't mind. Ayla's heart skipped. Daniel looked at her immediately. She tried to smile. It's fine, she said. Go, Daniel hesitated. I'll be back, he said softly. I know, she replied, and for the first time she meant it. The cockpit door closed behind Daniel. Captain Raydan stood up the moment he saw him. For a second, neither spoke, teacher and student, past and present. Then Daniel broke the silence. You've become a fine pilot, he said calmly. The flight feels steady, Raydan nodded. Because you taught me how to control everything, he replied. Daniel met his eyes. And what did I teach you about the heart? Raydan's jaw tightened. To ignore it, Daniel sighed. That, he said quietly, was my mistake. Raydan didn't respond immediately. Then, carefully, he asked, Why is she with you? Daniel didn't pretend not to understand. Because she chose to sit beside me, he replied. Raydan's voice lowered. She was my love. Daniel nodded. I know. Raydan looked up sharply. She told you? No, Daniel replied. She didn't have to. Silence fell again. Raydan finally spoke, his voice strained. I loved her, just not loudly enough. Daniel's eyes softened. And I lived long enough, he said, to learn that quiet love is often mistaken for absence. Raydan looked away. The truth hurt because it was true. Back in the cabin, Ayla stared at the empty seat beside her. She told herself not to overthink, but her heart remembered too much. She remembered Raydan promising after this flight. She remembered packing hope into patience. And she remembered the day she left, not angry, not dramatic, just tired. She pressed her palm lightly against the armrest. For the first time, she wasn't waiting anymore. She was choosing. Daniel returned. Ayla looked up instantly. He sat down, exhaling slowly. You okay? She asked. Daniel nodded. Yes, he said, but things are clearer now. She studied his face. You spoke to him. Yes, and Daniel paused. He still loves you. Ayla closed her eyes briefly. I know, she said, but he loves the idea of me, not the life I needed. Daniel didn't argue. Instead, he asked quietly, What do you need now? Ayla looked at him. Not at the past, not at the cockpit, at him. I need someone who stays, she said. Daniel reached for her hand. This time he held it. I'm here, he replied. The lights dimmed further. Ayla leaned closer, resting her head against Daniel's shoulder. He didn't move. didn't adjust, he simply became still like a place meant for rest. I feel guilty, Ayla whispered. Daniel replied softly. Love doesn't erase the past, it just refuses to live inside it. Her fingers curled slightly into his sleeve. Daniel wrapped his arm around her, not claiming, not demanding, protecting. Her breathing slowed. She trusted him enough to close her eyes. In the cockpit, Raydan watched the horizon. He imagined Ayla's head resting somewhere else, not on his shoulder. Never again, and for the first time he didn't blame her, he blamed himself. The sky outside was endless, but some distances could no longer be flown back. As the plane continued forward, Daniel whispered, "When we land, people will look." Ayla nodded against his shoulder. "I know, they'll question us. I know, they'll judge the timing, the age, everything." Ayla lifted her head and looked at him. "Will you still choose me?" she asked. "When this flight is over?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "I didn't wait this long in life," he said, "to walk away when it finally felt right." Ayla smiled, soft, emotional, real. Then she leaned in and kissed his cheek. Just once, brief, gentle, but full of meaning. Daniel closed his eyes. Because now he knew this wasn't comfort, this was love. When love is forced to face the truth, the plane moved steadily through the night sky. Outside, everything looked calm. Inside, nothing was. Ayla sat upright now, no longer resting against Daniel's shoulder. Not because she wanted distance, but because she felt something coming. A truth she could no longer avoid. Daniel sensed it. "You're thinking again," he said softly. Ayla nodded. "I always do when I know something is about to change." Daniel didn't reach for her this time, he waited. The cabin crew moved quietly between rows, then one of them stopped near Ayla's seat. "Miss," she said politely, "the captain would like to see you if you're comfortable." Ayla's heart dropped. Daniel looked at her. "You don't have to go," he said immediately. Ayla inhaled slowly. "I do," she replied. "Not for him," she looked at Daniel. "For me." Daniel nodded. "I'll be right here," he said. She stood, legs slightly unsteady, and followed the attendant toward the cockpit. The door closed behind her. Captain Raydan turned slowly. For a moment, he forgot every rule, every rank, every responsibility. He just saw her, the woman he once loved, standing in front of him again. "Ayla," he said quietly. She didn't smile, she didn't frown. She simply stood there, stronger than the girl he remembered. "You wanted to see me," she said. Raydan nodded. "I needed to," he replied. "I didn't expect you to be here like this." Ayla crossed her arms gently, not defensive, just steady. "I didn't expect to leave the way I did either," she said. Silence filled the cockpit. Then Raydan spoke, voice heavy. "I loved you." Ayla met his eyes. "I know. I still do," he added. That was the moment. The moment Ayla had once waited years to hear, and yet it felt late. "I never doubted that," she said softly. "I doubted whether you would ever choose me." Raydan's jaw tightened. "I thought time would fix everything," he said. Ayla shook her head. "Time doesn't fix neglect," she replied. "It just teaches people how to live without love." Raydan closed his eyes briefly. "Is it him?" he asked. Ayla didn't pretend. "Yes." Raydan looked down. "He's my teacher," he said quietly. "I know. And older than you." "I know." Raydan looked up again, pain visible now. "Then why?" he asked. Ayla answered without hesitation. "Because with him," she said, "I don't feel like I'm waiting for my life to begin." That truth hit harder than anger ever could. Ayla turned toward the door, but before leaving, she paused. "You didn't lose me because you flew too much," she said. "You lost me because you never landed." Then she opened the door and walked out. Daniel stood the moment he saw her. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. Ayla nodded. "Yes," she replied, "for the first time completely." She sat beside him again. This time she reached for his hand first. Daniel held it, not carefully, not hesitantly, honestly. "You didn't have to face that alone," he said. "I know," she replied, "but I needed to close that door myself." Daniel squeezed her hand. "I'm proud of you," he said. Those words meant more to her than any apology ever had. The plane began its descent, lights flickered on softly. Daniel leaned closer. "When we land," he said, "this won't be easy." Ayla nodded. "Nothing real ever is." He searched her face. "You're sure?" he asked. Ayla didn't answer immediately. She placed her head gently against his shoulder again. "Yes," she said, "I'm done waiting for love that never arrives." Daniel closed his eyes because he knew this love would be questioned, judged, challenged, but it would also be chosen. In the cockpit, Raydan announced the descent. His voice was steady, professional, but something inside him had changed. For the first time he understood love isn't about holding on. Sometimes it's about letting go before you destroy it. As the wheels prepared to touch the ground, Ayla whispered, "Whatever happens next, thank you for staying." Daniel kissed her hair gently. "Where else would I be?" he replied. The plane descended. 3 lives crossed a line they could never uncross. And love prepared for its final test. After landing, love learns to breathe. The wheels touched the ground with a dull, steady thud. The flight was over, but for Ayla and Daniel, the real journey had just begun. Applause rippled through the cabin, small, polite, automatic. People reached for bags, phones, coats. Life resumed. Ayla stayed seated. Her hand was still in Daniel's, not tightly, not loosely. As if both were silently agreeing not to let go just yet. "This is where it gets harder," Daniel said quietly. Ayla nodded. "I know," she replied, "but at least it's no longer invisible." Daniel studied her face. She wasn't afraid, she was resolved. They stood when the aisle cleared. Passengers passed them, some glanced, some smiled politely, some noticed nothing at all, but a few looks lingered longer than necessary. Questions lived in those looks. Judgment too, Daniel felt it immediately. Years of standing confidently in lecture halls had not prepared him for this kind of attention. Ayla noticed his change in posture. "Are you okay?" she asked. Daniel inhaled slowly. "I've spent my life being respected," he said. "I never thought I'd need courage for love." Ayla squeezed his hand. "Then let me lend you mine," she said. Daniel smiled faintly. That was when he realized this wasn't just affection. This was partnership. At the aircraft door, Captain Raydan stood to greet passengers, professional, composed. Ayla felt her steps slow as they approached. Daniel felt it too. Raydan met their eyes. For a second, the world narrowed again to 3 people. He nodded respectfully at Daniel, then looked at Ayla. "I hope you have a good stay," he said calmly. No bitterness, no accusation, just acceptance. Ayla paused. "Thank you," she replied, and for the first time she meant it without pain. She walked past him without looking back. Raydan watched her go and let her go. The terminal was bright and loud, too loud. Daniel felt suddenly exposed. He noticed whispers, a glance, a raised eyebrow. Ayla noticed too. She stopped walking. Daniel turned toward her. "Do you want to slow down?" he asked. She shook her head. "No," she said. "I want to stop hiding." She turned to face him. Right there in the middle of the terminal, people passed. Life moved. "Listen to me," she said softly. "I didn't choose you because you were safe." Daniel's heart tightened. "I chose you because you were honest." Daniel searched her face. And when people ask, he said, when they judge, Ayla answered calmly, then let them. They weren't there when I was lonely, Daniel exhaled. Something heavy lifted from his chest. Later, sitting at a quiet cafe near the windows, Daniel stared at his untouched coffee. Ayla watched him carefully. You're thinking again, she said. Daniel nodded. I'm afraid, he admitted. Not of losing you, but of hurting you. Ayla reached across the table. Say it, she said. Daniel swallowed. The world will see us before it understands us. Ayla smiled sadly. The world never understood me when I was waiting either, she replied. At least now I'm living. Daniel covered her hand with his. Are you ready, he asked, for what this might cost? Ayla met his gaze. I already paid the price of a love that never showed up, she said. I won't pay that again. Daniel nodded slowly. That was the moment he stopped doubting. Night fell outside the terminal windows, lights reflected on the glass. Daniel and Ayla stood to leave. As they walked, Daniel felt her hand slip into his coat pocket. Private, intimate, certain. Stay with me tonight, Ayla said quietly. Daniel stopped walking. He turned to her, not startled, not rushed. Because you're afraid? He asked gently. Ayla shook her head. Because I'm not, she replied. Daniel rested his forehead against hers. No promises tonight, he said softly, just presence. Ayla smiled. That's all I want? Back in his car alone, Captain Raydan sat in silence. The airport lights blurred through the windshield. He replayed the flight, her words, her calm. He realized something painful and true. She hadn't chosen Daniel over him, she had chosen herself, and loving someone sometimes meant accepting that. Raydan started the engine. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel angry, just older and wiser. In the hotel elevator, Daniel and Ayla stood close. Not touching, not distant, balanced. As the doors closed, Daniel spoke quietly. Tomorrow we'll ask questions. Ayla nodded. Tomorrow can wait, she said. The elevator stopped. The doors opened, and when love is questioned by the world, morning arrived quietly. Too quietly. The city outside the hotel window was already awake, moving forward without knowing what it was about to demand from two people who had just chosen each other. Daniel stood by the window, hands in his pockets, watching cars move like thoughts that never stopped. Ayla woke slowly. She didn't panic when she saw him there. She smiled. You look like someone planning an escape, she said softly. Daniel turned toward her. Not an escape, he replied. A calculation. Ayla sat up, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. That sounds serious, Daniel nodded. It is. They sat together at the small table near the window, coffee untouched between them. Daniel finally spoke. My university will find out, he said. People talk, they always do. Ayla listened without interrupting. They'll question my judgment, he continued. My age, my position, my integrity. Ayla leaned back slightly. And you, she asked. Daniel hesitated. I'll survive that, he said. But you won't be treated gently. Ayla studied him carefully. You're worried about me, she said. Daniel met her gaze. I'm worried about what this world does to women who refuse to stay quiet. Ayla smiled faintly. I've already lived through that world, she replied. I just didn't have anyone standing beside me before. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. Later that day, they walked through the city, not holding hands openly. Not hiding either, just together. People looked. Some smiled politely. Some stared too long. Daniel noticed every single one. Ayla noticed none. She had spent too many years being invisible to care about being seen. At a quiet park bench, Daniel finally stopped. "Ayla," he said, voice heavy, "I need to ask you something." She turned to him. "If I asked you to step back," he continued slowly, "just until things settle." Ayla waited. "Would you?" The silence that followed was gentle, not sharp. Ayla took a breath. "No," she said calmly. Daniel closed his eyes. "I thought so." She reached for his hand. "Not because I don't care," she added, "but because I've already stepped back my whole life." Daniel looked at her, conflicted. "I don't want to be the reason you're hurt." Ayla squeezed his hand. "Then don't be the reason I disappear." Those words settled the argument without raising a voice. That evening, Daniel received the call he had expected. The university dean, polite, concerned, careful. Daniel listened quietly. When the call ended, he sat still for a long moment. Ayla watched him. "They know," he said. "And?" she asked. "They want to talk," he replied. "Soon." Ayla nodded. "Will you go?" "Yes." "And will you hide me?" Daniel looked at her sharply. "No," he said, "I won't." Ayla smiled. "Then go," she said. "And tell them the truth." Daniel laughed softly. "You make bravery sound simple." "It is," she replied, "when you're done being afraid." That night, Daniel lay awake beside her. He didn't touch her, didn't move. He was afraid movement might disturb the fragile calm. Ayla sensed it. She turned toward him. "You're pulling away," she said quietly. Daniel exhaled. "I'm preparing myself," he replied, "to lose things I worked my whole life for." Ayla placed her hand on his chest. "And I'm choosing you," she said, "not because you're safe, but because you're honest." Daniel swallowed hard. "What if I fail you?" he asked. Ayla leaned closer, resting her forehead against his. "Then fail with me," she replied. "Not without me." Daniel closed his eyes. That was the moment he stopped thinking like a respected professor and started thinking like a man in love. Across the city, Captain Raydan sat alone in his apartment. Uniform folded neatly, lights off. He replayed the flight again and again, not angrily, thoughtfully. For the first time, he questioned the version of strength he had built his life on. Control, distance, silence. He realized too late that love needed courage more than discipline. Raydan poured a glass of water and stared out the window. "I hope she's happy," he whispered, and meant it. The next morning, Daniel dressed carefully, not formally, not casually, intentionally. Ayla watched from the bed. "You look nervous," she said. Daniel smiled. "I am." She stood and walked to him. She adjusted his collar gently. "Whatever happens today," she said, "don't defend loving me like it's a mistake." Daniel covered her hands with his. "I won't," he promised. "I'll defend it like it's the truth." She smiled. And for the first time, Daniel walked out the door without doubt. When love refuses to apologize, the university building looked the same as it always had. Tall, calm, certain of its authority, but for Daniel, everything felt different. He stood outside the conference room for a moment longer than necessary. Not because he was afraid of losing his career, but because he knew whatever he said next would define the rest of his life. Inside, the room was quiet, too quiet. 3 senior faculty members sat at the table, professional smiles, measured concern. "Professor Daniel," the dean began, "thank you for coming on such short notice." Daniel nodded and took a seat. He didn't rush to speak. He waited. "We've received some questions," another member said carefully, "regarding your personal life." Daniel met their eyes. "Yes," he replied calmly, "I expected that." The dean folded his hands. "You understand how this might look," he said. "Your age, your position, the attention." Daniel listened, then spoke. I understand how it looks, he said, but I also understand how it feels. Silence. Daniel continued. I didn't seek approval when I devoted my life to teaching, he said, and I won't seek permission to love honestly. One of them shifted uncomfortably. This could affect your reputation, someone said. Daniel nodded. I know, and the universities. Daniel nodded again. I know. The dean leaned forward. Then why proceed? He asked. Daniel answered without hesitation. Because for the first time, he said, I'm not hiding behind respectability to avoid truth. The room fell silent. Not hostile, not warm, just uncertain. Outside, Ayla sat on a bench across the street. She didn't belong here, and she knew it. Students passed by, laughing, living. She watched them without envy. Her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel sent earlier. No matter what happens, I chose you before I walked in. She smiled softly. That was enough. Back in the room, the dean spoke again. We're not asking you to end anything, he said slowly. We're asking you to be careful. Daniel stood. I've been careful my whole life, he replied, and it left me alone. He paused. If caution means denying something real, he added, then I'm done being careful. One of them sighed. Then you leave us no choice but to reconsider your position. Daniel nodded once. I understand. And with that, he walked out, no anger, no regret, just clarity. When Daniel stepped outside, the sun felt brighter than before. He spotted Ayla immediately. She stood the moment she saw him. Her eyes searched his face. Well, she asked quietly. Daniel smiled. I may have just made myself very unpopular, he said. Ayla swallowed. And I've never felt lighter. She exhaled, relief and fear mixing together. You didn't have to do that, she said. Daniel stepped closer. Yes, he replied. I did. He took her hands openly this time, no hiding. No lowering his voice. Because loving you is not a scandal, he said. It's the most honest thing I've ever done. Ayla's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, of being chosen. Across the city, Captain Raydan stood on a balcony overlooking the skyline. He had read the news already. Rumors traveled fast. He closed his eyes. Once he would have called this foolish, irresponsible. Now it looked like courage. He whispered into the empty air, I hope you never wait again. Daniel and Ayla walked away from the campus together. Slowly, deliberately, the world didn't stop. People still passed, cars still moved, but something fundamental had shifted. Ayla looked up at Daniel. Do you regret it? She asked. He didn't even think. No, he said. I regret the years I spent convincing myself that love needed permission. She leaned closer as they walked. You might lose more, she warned softly. Daniel smiled. I already found what matters. They stopped at a crosswalk. Daniel turned to her. Whatever comes next, he said, won't be easy. Ayla nodded. I know, and you're still here, she smiled gently. I didn't wait all those years, she replied, to walk away now. Daniel pulled her into a quiet embrace, not dramatic, not urgent, certain. That night, as they stood by the window of their small apartment, city lights blinking below, Ayla rested her head on Daniel's shoulder. We're really doing this, she whispered. Daniel kissed her hair. Yes, he said. And we're not apologizing. The world outside buzzed with opinions. Inside, there was peace love that finally lands. The city was quieter at night, not silent, just softer, like it knew something important had already been decided. Daniel stood by the window of their small apartment, watching the lights below flicker like distant stars. For years, he had believed purpose came from classrooms, titles, and respect. Now purpose was standing a few steps behind him. Ayla, she walked toward him slowly, wrapped in one of his shirts, barefoot on the cold floor. "You're thinking again," she said gently. Daniel smiled. "I was wondering," he replied, "how I lived so long without knowing this kind of peace." Ayla stood beside him. "Maybe," she said, "you weren't meant to know it earlier." Daniel turned to her. "And you?" he asked. "Do you miss the life you left?" Ayla didn't answer immediately. She thought of waiting, of empty nights, of loving someone who never arrived. Then she shook her head. "No," she said. "I miss the version of me that didn't think love had to be earned." Daniel reached for her hand. "That version is back," he said. Across the city, Captain Raydan sat alone in a quiet cafe, no uniform, no announcements. Just a man and his thoughts. He stared at his phone, scrolling past photos he had never deleted. Ayla smiling at an airport fence. Ayla laughing softly in bad weather. He closed the phone. For the first time, it didn't hurt the way it used to. He realized something painful and freeing. He hadn't lost her to another man. He had lost her to time and to his own fear. Raydan whispered to himself, "Some lessons only land when it's too late." He stood, paid the bill, and walked out lighter than before. Weeks passed. The noise faded, judgment softened into curiosity, then into silence. Daniel took fewer lectures, more walks. More mornings that began slowly. Ayla found work she loved, not impressive on paper but honest. They learned each other in small ways. Daniel learned Ayla drank tea when she was nervous. Ayla learned Daniel touched books the way some people touched memories. They argued, they laughed, they stayed. One evening, sitting on the balcony, Ayla spoke quietly. "Do you ever wonder," she asked, "what people will say about us?" Daniel smiled. "They'll say many things," he replied, "but none of them lived our lives." She leaned against him. "Promise me something," she said. Daniel turned to her. "Anything." "If this ever becomes heavy," she continued, "if the world makes you regret me," Daniel interrupted gently. "I won't," he said. She looked at him, searching. "Because I didn't choose you to be brave," she said. "I chose you to be honest." Daniel kissed her forehead. "And I didn't choose you to escape loneliness," he replied. "I chose you because love finally felt like home." Months later, Daniel stood in a small hall, no banners, no titles, just a few people who mattered. He spoke about choice, about fear, about how love doesn't arrive early or late, only when we're finally ready to stop running. Ayla watched from the back, eyes warm, heart full. This wasn't the life she imagined years ago. It was better because it was real. One night, lying beside each other, Ayla traced slow circles on Daniel's chest. "If we hadn't taken that flight," she whispered, "do you think we would have found each other?" Daniel thought for a moment. "No," he replied honestly. "But I think we would have kept looking without knowing why." She smiled. "I'm glad we stopped looking," she said. Daniel pulled her closer. "So am I." Far above the city, a plane crossed the night sky. Its lights blinked softly. Somewhere in the cockpit, a captain guided it forward, steady, calm, focused. Raydan watched it from his window, and for the first time he didn't wish he were flying. He wished the people he once loved were happy, and they were. Daniel and Ayla stood at the window together, watching the same plane disappear into the dark. "Do you ever miss flying?" Ayla asked. Daniel smiled. "I still love the sky," he said. "I just don't live there anymore." She squeezed his hand. "Good," she replied. "I like you here." Daniel leaned down and kissed her, slow, sure, unafraid, not because love was perfect, but because it was chosen. The sky didn't bring them together, it simply stopped them from running away. And sometimes that's all love needs.